You saw that shrub at the garden center, didn't you? The little plastic tag promised you the world. Fast growth, no fuss. Color from spring right through the first frost. You brought it home, tucked it into your very best bed, and handed it years of your life. That is exactly the kind of shrub I want to talk to you about today. After 25 years with my hands in the soil, I have dug out more shrubs than most people will ever plant, and there are 12 I will never, ever put in the ground again. Here's the hard part. Most gardeners don't find out why until the roots are already everywhere. I learned it the slow, painful way, kneeling on a wet October morning in front of a burning bush I once adored. Stay with me right to the end because the very last shrub on this list is one almost everybody swears is perfectly safe. And a study out of Connecticut proved exactly how wrong that is. And this matters whether you planted yours last spring or 30 years ago. Let me start with that burning bush because it broke my heart first. You know the one. Every autumn it turns that electric, unforgettable red, the color that makes strangers slow their cars down. That is the whole reason I planted mine, back when I thought a good shrub was simply one that looked stunning. But here is the part the garden tag will never tell you. That fire red beauty, the one called Euonymus elatus, is one of the most aggressive escape artists in the whole shrub world. Birds eat the berries, fly off, and drop the seeds deep into woodlands and roadside edges, where thick young burning bushes crowd out the native plants that our wildlife actually needs. It got so bad that Massachusetts and New Hampshire made it illegal to sell. Think about that. A shrub sold at nearly every nursery in the country is banned outright in 2 states. When I finally dug mine out, I found seedlings I never planted, popping up 40 feet away in my neighbor's fence line. I had been quietly seeding the whole street. So if you love that fall color, and I understand completely if you do, please hear me. There are natives that give you the very same blaze without the guilt. But burning bush is honestly the gentle one on this list, and the next shrub is where I really started paying attention. Let me tell you about the butterfly bush. Now this one hurts to say because it was sold to me as the good guy. Butylja davidii, the pollinator plant. The one that pulls in clouds of butterflies on a July afternoon and makes your garden look like a nature documentary. And it does bring the butterflies. That part is true. What no one told me is what it does the rest of the year. A single mature butterfly bush can throw out up to 40,000 seeds in one season. And those seeds blow far past your fence, sprouting in ditches, riverbanks, and wild meadows where they choke out the very plants that butterfly caterpillars must eat to survive. So you feed the adult butterflies for a few weeks and starve their babies for good. Oregon took it so seriously that the state banned the sale of the old, fertile varieties, and now only tested, sterile types can be sold there. I let mine grow for 6 years before I understood what I was doing. Pulling it out, I found baby butterfly bushes tucked into 3 neighboring gardens. That is when I stopped trusting the tag and started reading the research. Therefore, the next time you see a hedge that looks tidy and free and easy, I want you to look twice, because privet is the shrub that taught me tidy can be a trap. You have seen privet 1,000 times without knowing its name. It is that dense, dark green hedge that seems to grow anywhere, sheared into neat walls around old houses and parking lots. Ligustrum, in all its forms, was the darling of the hedge world for 100 years because it grows fast and takes any abuse. But that same wild strength is exactly the problem. Privet escapes into forests across the American Southeast and the United Kingdom, forming shady thickets so dense that nothing native can grow beneath them. And once it is established, the roots resprout again and again, no matter how many times you cut it. And here is a piece most people miss entirely. Those creamy privet flowers people think smell sweet are a genuine misery for allergy sufferers in early summer, and the pollen count around a blooming privet hedge can leave sensitive folks sneezing for weeks. I planted a short privet run as a young gardener, thinking I was being practical. I spent the next decade fighting seedlings that marched right across my lawn. A hedge should hold its line. Privet does not know where the line is. But if privet spreads where you can see it, this next shrub does its damage where you would never think to look, and that is what makes it so dangerous. I need to talk about nandina, the one they call heavenly bamboo. It is not bamboo at all, and after what I learned, I promise you there is nothing heavenly about it. Nandina domestica is everywhere in warmer gardens, prized for those bright red berries that hang on all winter long and look so cheerful against the snow. Those berries are the whole selling point. those berries are also the problem. They contain cyanide compounds, and in Thomas County, Georgia, wildlife officials and diagnostic labs connected to the University of Georgia documented a flock of cedar waxwings found dead beneath nandina shrubs, their bodies full of the plant's toxic berries. The birds gorged on them in a hungry winter and were poisoned. I remember reading that account and feeling sick because I had nandina growing right beside my bird feeder for years, thinking I was doing the birds a kindness. If you grow it, at the very least you can cut the berry clusters off before winter, so hungry birds can't strip them in a single desperate meal. But honestly, once I knew, I could not look at those red berries the same way again. Therefore, let's talk about a shrub that won't poison anything, but will absolutely swallow your garden whole, one seed at a time. Rose of Sharon. Now, I can already hear some of you, because this one has fans, and I understand why. Those big hibiscus flowers in late summer, in white and lavender, and that soft rose pink, arriving just when the rest of the garden is tired and fading. Hibiscus syriacus fills a real gap in the August border, but let me tell you what happens after those flowers fade. Every single bloom becomes a seed pod, and every pod scatters seed like confetti. And the following spring you will find dozens, sometimes hundreds, of little rows of Sharon seedlings crowding your beds, your gravel paths, and your neighbor's tulips. I once counted more than 60 seedlings under one mature plant in a single April morning. I spent more time weeding out its children than I ever spent enjoying its flowers. There are newer seedless varieties now, and if you truly love the bloom, those are the only ones I would even consider. The old-fashioned kind will hand you a full-time weeding job you never signed up for. But at least Rose of Sharon stays put where its own seeds land, and the next shrub does something far sneakier, because it walks. Forsythia, that great yellow shout of spring, the very first color after a long gray winter, and I will admit I still have a soft spot for the sight of it, for about 2 weeks, and that is the first catch. All that glory is over in roughly 14 days, and then you are left with a big, coarse, shapeless green blob for the other 50 weeks of the year. But the real trouble is how it travels. Wherever a forsythia branch bends down and touches the soil, it puts down roots and starts a brand new plant, a habit called tip layering. And before you know it, one polite shrub has become a sprawling, tangled thicket 10 feet across, marching steadily into your lawn. I planted 3. Within 8 years, I effectively had a forsythia hedge I never asked for, and cutting it back only made it bushier and angrier. If you want 2 weeks of yellow in exchange for a lifetime of wrestling, forsythia is your shrub. I decided the wrestling wasn't worth it. Therefore, I want to warn you about a shrub that fights back not with roots, but with blood, because I still have the scars from this one. Pyracantha, firethorn. On paper, it sounds wonderful: glossy evergreen leaves, foamy white spring flowers, and then a heavy fall crop of orange or red berries that light up a wall. Nurseries love to train it flat against brick, and it does look magnificent. But the name firethorn is not decoration. This shrub is armed with thorns up to 2 inches long, hard as nails and needle sharp, and they hide under the foliage waiting for your hands. Every single time I pruned mine, I came away bleeding. And those puncture wounds are notorious for getting infected because the thorn tips carry bacteria deep under the skin. And as if that weren't enough, pyracantha is highly prone to fire blight, a bacterial disease called Erwinia amylivora that turns whole branches black and scorched looking almost overnight, and there is no cure once it takes hold. So you get a shrub that stabs you when you care for it and dies in ugly black patches anyway. I gave mine 3 years. My hands have never been happier since it left. You're standing there realizing your own hedge, or your neighbor's, might already be doing exactly what mine did, sending its children into every yard on the block while you had no idea. That's the moment I wish someone had handed me a real system instead of a plastic tag, and that's exactly what the Complete Plant Rescue Collection is built for. Inside, you get a 5-minute diagnostic framework that reads any sick or spreading plant, so you finally know thirst from overwatering and can decode yellowing leaves clue by clue before a mistake costs you years. You also get the seasonal pruning map and rescue protocols in Old Gardener's Rescue Secrets, so you know the exact moment to cut, whether that's a rose, a peony, or a shrub you're finally ready to remove for good. Here's something you can check tonight for free. Walk out with a flashlight and look under any dense hedge you have, privet or barberry or anything similar, and see how damp and sheltered that space feels underneath. Because that hidden microclimate is exactly the kind of clue this diagnostic system trains you to read. The fastest way to get the books is to scan the QR code right there on your screen, or go to the link in the description or the pinned comment. Every gardening season brings a new round of these decisions, so the earlier you can read your plants correctly, the fewer years you hand over to the wrong shrub. Now let's get back to privet, because the next thing I found out about it explains exactly why that tidy hedge never seems to know where to stop. But fire blight brings me straight to the next shrub, because it shares the very same disease and adds a spreading habit on top of it. Cotoneaster. This is the low, arching shrub with the tiny leaves and the small red berries, often planted to tumble over a wall or cover a slope. And I understand the appeal because it does knit together into a nice green mat. Here is the trouble. Like its cousin, the firethorn, cotoneaster is a favorite host for fire blight. And in areas where that disease is active, it becomes a reservoir that keeps infecting nearby apples, pears, and hawthorns. Beyond the disease, birds spread its berries far and wide, and several cotoneaster species have become invasive in the United Kingdom and along the west coast of the United States, escaping into limestone grasslands and coastal scrub where they smother rare native plants. I put a cotoneaster in to cover a dry bank, thinking I had found the easy answer. What I actually planted was a disease bridge and a seed factory rolled into one. A ground cover should solve problems, not create three new ones. Therefore, before you reach for anything to hide a wall or a fence, let me stop you from making the biggest size mistake of all, because this next one is a giant in a shrub's clothing. Leyland cypress, sold as the fast privacy hedge, the instant green screen, the answer to a nosy neighbor. And oh, it grows fast, sometimes 3 feet a year, which is exactly the trap. Because that little 6-foot plant you set in the ground wants to become a 60 or 70-foot tree, and it will not stop just because you wanted a 9-foot hedge. I have watched entire suburban streets planted with tidy Leyland hedges that within 15 years turned into towering, light-blocking walls that no ladder could reach. And they get sick. Leyland cypress is plagued by bagworms that strip the foliage and by canker diseases, especially ceridium canker, that kill off whole sections and leave brown dead patches that never green up again. Once a big Leyland turns brown in the middle, there is no fixing it, because these trees will not resprout from bare old wood. You end up removing an enormous, dead, tangled thing at great cost. I have helped neighbors take out Leylands that cost more to remove than the whole garden costs to plant. Now, I know some of you are sitting there with a sinking feeling because you already have one of these shrubs and it is not a baby anymore. It is a big, established plant that you have watered and pruned and lived alongside for years, and you are thinking this advice came too late for you. I promise you it did not, and this next part is written specifically for you and your mature shrub. You do not have to dig up a huge, deep-rooted plant by brute force, and you do not have to poison your whole bed. The single most effective thing I ever learned is the cut stump method, and the secret is the timing. In autumn, once the nights turn cool, your shrub stops pushing growth upward and starts pulling all its sugars and energy down into the roots for winter storage. That is your window. If you cut the shrub low, right down to a clean stump, and treat the fresh cut surface within a few minutes, while the plant is drawing everything downward, the roots pull the treatment down with the sugars, and the whole root system gives up instead of resprouting angrier than before. Extension horticulturists recommend this fall timing precisely because you work with the plant's own biology instead of fighting it. For a shrub like forsythia or privet that resprouts from the base, this is the difference between 1 weekend of work and 10 years of chasing suckers. And once that stump is dead, you have an open, sunny spot ready for something native and beautiful that will finally give back instead of taking over. You are not starting from zero. You are reclaiming ground you already own. But there is one more shrub on this middle stretch of the list, and it hides in plain sight because it comes dressed as a well-behaved, tidy little mound. Japanese spirea. You know the ones, those low, dense shrubs with the flat pink flower clusters and the leaves that turn coppery in fall, sold in every big box store in flats of 10 because they are cheap and cheerful and small, and that small size is the great disguise. Spirea japonica sets huge amounts of seed, and those seeds wash down streams and along ditches and establish in wetlands and open woods where dense spirea thickets crowd out the native shrubs that feed pollinators and birds. It is listed as invasive across large parts of the eastern United States, and the very traits that make it easy in your yard, the toughness, the seeding, the willingness to grow anywhere, are exactly what make it a menace once it escapes. I planted a tidy row of them along a path and spent years pulling their offspring out of a damp corner 30 feet downhill. A shrub that behaves in the bed but misbehaves in the wild is still a shrub I will not plant again. Which brings me, at last, to the 12th shrub. And I saved this one for the very end on purpose, because it is the one almost every gardener I know still believes is completely harmless. In fact, people plant it for safety, for a low, thorny, deer-proof hedge that keeps things out. I am talking about Japanese barberry, Berberis thunbergii, that compact shrub with the small round leaves in green or deep burgundy or gold, the one you see edging countless front walks because the deer won't touch it and it needs almost no care. For years I thought it was one of the innocent ones. Then I found the research, and I have never looked at a barberry hedge the same way since. Scientists at the Connecticut Agricultural Experiment Station, led by researchers including Dr. Scott Williams and Dr. Jeffrey Ward, studied what actually lives inside dense Japanese barberry, and what they found stopped me cold. The structure of the shrub, low and thick and humid underneath, creates the perfect sheltered, moist microclimate for black-legged ticks, the very ticks that carry Lyme disease. Their fieldwork found dramatically higher numbers of infected ticks in stands of dense barberry than in areas where the barberry had been removed, on the order of many times more. Let that sink in. The pretty, low-maintenance hedge along the front path, the one grandmother planted because it was so easy, can be quietly raising a population of Lyme-carrying ticks, right where children and pets brush past it. And here is the part that felt like discovered treasure, the piece buried under decades of nursery marketing that a few careful researchers kept alive. Those same Connecticut scientists did not just sound the alarm, they worked out how to fix it, and the method is something almost no home gardener has ever heard. Because barberry resprouts stubbornly from its crown when you simply cut it, they found that treating the cut crowns with directed heat, a controlled pass with a propane torch in early spring, right as the plant leaves out and is at its weakest, kills the root crown and dramatically knocks back both the barberry and the tick population living inside it. Early spring, when the ground is still damp and the shrub has just barely woken up, is the exact window. That is the timing detail that separates people who clear their barberry for good from people who watch it come roaring back the following summer. Now, if a torch is more than you want to handle, that autumn cut stump method I gave you earlier works too, treating the fresh crown while the plant pulls everything down into its roots. Either way, the message is the same one those researchers fought to get heard. This is not a harmless little hedge. It is a shelter for the one bite that can change your health for years. I pulled every barberry out of my own garden this spring after I read that study, and I replaced them with native inkberry and low bayberry shrubs that give you the same tidy green edge and actually feed the birds instead of the ticks. So there they are, the 12 shrubs I will never plant again, not because they are ugly, but because every one of them asked for far more than it ever gave back. And here is what I want you to carry away from all of this. You are not a bad gardener for having any of these in your yard. I planted most of them myself, with the best of intentions, trusting a plastic tag over the quiet wisdom of people who had watched these plants for generations. The moment you know what a plant really does, above the soil and below it, and far beyond your fence line, you get to make a better choice, and it is never, ever too late to make it. You are the kind of gardener who pours years into a piece of ground because you love it. And that love is exactly why you deserve to know the truth about what you are planting. So tell me, and I really do read these, which of these 12 shrubs is standing in your garden right now? Is it the burning bush you love for its fall color, the barberry along the front walk, or the leyland cypress that got away from you? Type the name of that one shrub in the comments below, right now, and tell me whether you are going to keep it or finally take it out this season. And I would love to know where in the world you are gardening from, because a shrub that misbehaves in Georgia behaves very differently in Yorkshire. If you refuse to lose your garden to bad advice off a plastic tag, come stand on my side of the fence and subscribe, because that is exactly who we are here, gardeners who would rather know the hard truth than lose a whole season to a pretty mistake. And next time, I am going to show you the 5 native shrubs I planted in place of these 12, and the one flowering hedge that gives you spring blooms, fall berries for the birds, and not a single tick if you get one crucial planting step right before the ground freezes. I will see you then right here by the fence. Before you go, let me tell you what waits inside the blooming garden circle. This video named The Shrubs I Regret. Inside, we pick up right where we stopped. You can ask me your own garden question, and I answer you myself, never a robot. And you won't be doing this alone. Just point your phone's camera at the code on screen. You can cancel anytime with one click. I'd love to see you there. Now that you know which shrubs to avoid, let me show you the plants I trust every single year. They come back stronger, they save you work, and they never let me down. That one's starting right here.